Some Kirby Russia hot takes. The legislative branch, this big room full of guys making laws, is a terrible, terrible idea that we're simply stuck with due to historical inertia. So pretty much all over the world, there are three branches of government, and one of them makes legislation, right? And that tends to look like a bunch of people sitting in a big room, often hundreds of them, making laws. But there are some real key problems with this. Well, firstly, you cannot have responsibility with anonymity. There are just vastly too many people to keep track of. The voters vote for a particular party, usually to get some sort of results, right? So Republican voters generally vote for Republican candidates because they're against abortion or something, right? Well, there's no guarantee that anyone in Congress is going to actually vote that way. So if we care about democracy, people should get what they vote for. But when we have this big, anonymous, titanic system, it's impossible for people to really know exactly what they're voting for. Secondly, say we are discussing something like the national medical care system in the UK. We're in Parliament, right? Well, only a few parliamentarians are actually going to be experts in the medical field. There's generally people in a parliament, Congress, Duma, whatever, from all different sorts of backgrounds, but you're never going to be able to get everyone, or at least the overwhelming majority, to be true experts in a particular field. So what happens? We have people who don't know anything about medical care voting over it, creating the legislation that guides entire nations when they're not experts in it. And yes, you could say, well, sometimes they form committees, and these committees are experts, and they put together the legislation that is then sort of passed on to the greater Congress or Parliament to read. Yeah, but still the people who are then reading the work of the committee don't know anything either. You see what I mean? So we essentially put the legislation, put law in our future into the hands of people who are not experts in that field. There is never a law being passed where the overwhelming majority of senators, congressmen, parliamentarians are experts in that field. That is absolutely dismal. So if we step back and we look at these parliaments from all over the world, why does your country have a parliament? Well, because America has a Congress, and America is the biggest influence on the political systems of the world today. Well, why does America have that system? Because of the British Parliament. Why do the British have that? Probably because they wanted to mimic the Roman Empire in their Senate. We don't need this. This is the 21st century. We don't need to gather people from these little regions who supposedly represent those regions, but again, there's no mechanisms to force someone from Kent, England, or Missouri in America to represent the interests of that region. There's no mechanism. So in theory, we have all these people coming from all these regions to represent them that they can't really represent, to vote on legislation that they're not experts in, that they don't really know anything about, that is written on thousands of pieces of paper that they don't read, and then we expect this to be some sort of democracy where we, the people, create the law. This is madness. The legislative bloat needs to end. I don't care what system we make, but we cannot have hundreds of people sitting in a room making laws. This does not work. We are simply used to it because of historical inertia and because it's the norm. It does not work. It is intellectually insulting. Tim Kirby Russia hot takes: the legislative branch of almost every country on earth, in fact, probably every country on earth, is vastly over bloated and filled with anonymous losers. Whether you call it a Congress or a Parliament or a Duma or some other fancy word, we are very used to the idea that the people who make laws are a giant mass of usually a couple hundred people sitting in a big room. Now, this is a weird idea. You know the reason why this is the way it is? Well, we all are copying America. And America copied their Congress from the British Parliament. And the British Parliament, more or less, and like a lot of European countries, copied the idea of having a bunch of people in a room from the Roman Senate 2,000 years ago. This idea that we have to send a bunch of people physically to one big room to make a bunch of laws is something from the pre-telephone, pre-electricity era. This is not necessary. Furthermore, there are some major problems with this. Okay, let's say we need legislation regarding medical care. All right, so in Congress, there's 435 people. How many of them truly understand the way the medical industry works to the extent that they could actually make informed, really well-made legislation that would change things for the better? 3, 5, maybe 10 at the most? So the overwhelming majority of people who are going to vote on a given piece of legislation are never experts in that field. They don't know anything about it. And trust me, guys, when you are really naive about a particular subject, it is very easy to fool you.